Moin Moin, Donspektor here, today with another rather mainstream review, and I do have the EOZ Air here. But this review is not just a review about this product, it's also more in question of should you trust or buy an audio product by a random crowdfunding company. And this idea I've already had quite a few months ago, but haven't done it yet. Only when Z actually made his review about the EOZ Arc. I think Arc. I thought, yeah, okay, now it's finally time to tell you about the Air, which is their first attempt of making an true wireless thing. And yeah, I'm going to split this review in kind of two parts. The first one is going to be longer, and it's going to be just the in-depth review about the Air, what it can, what it can't. And the second part is going to be about my experience and also the general, I would say, customer experience with EOZ. Because Z tends to be either pretty hyped or, again, pretty hating on audio products and does not really care about the overall customer experience with companies. So I'm going to give you a bit more of an in-depth review or like an in-depth experience here because I had to write their support also, I think, 2 times or so. Yeah. So let's get directly into it. Yeah, as you can see, this is the packaging. It does overall look pretty promising. I mean, at least for a crowdfunding company, this is pretty professional standard, right? Like, I have expected much worse when I first got this product, I think like 1.5 years ago or so. And yeah, you can already see what you should be getting in the box or what you will be getting. So you do have the cable here, you do have the TWS itself, you do have this ear hook thing if you really want to be sure to not lose them, but you do have hooks. And you do get 3 pair of silicone tips and 2 pair of foam tips. Short note here, we already have the first lie in the crowdfunding campaign. They say 3 different pair of foam tips. Well, the original, or like the pair you get, only comes with 2 pair. So yeah, let's open the box and see what you'll be getting. Oh yeah, the only truth is music. Oh yes, it absolutely is. So before we go to the in-ear, let's go over the accessories, which you could already have seen in the bag. Yeah, overall packaging itself, as I said, is better than I expected. And let's check out the accessories. You do get the warranty card, small accessories, warranty card, and short user manual. Unfortunately, the user manual is really just short, and it does not cover details like how to reset your in-ear, which I'm going to come back later on when we talk about the company. So yeah, USB-C, pretty nice. Some other products still use micro fucking USB. Nobody wants that. Overall length is pretty short, but it is not recessed the part itself, so you can use any USB-C to USB-C or USB-A to USB-C cable you want. The ear hook thing, it's artificial leather. It does not feel too terrible. I don't think you're going to need it, but yeah, it depends on what you actually want to do with the thing. And then we do have the tips. And yes, you will just be getting 1 pair of foam tips if you buy it. And this is just the large size here in here because the medium size is pretty nice. Maybe you can see it here. Or like, I'm not sure if it's medium or small because in the campaign it said 3 pairs when you just get 2 pairs. And I'm not sure if this is small or medium. I don't know because I don't know what either of this will be in diameter. They don't specify. And I do like this small or medium-sized foam tips. Yeah, the bigger ones are totally normal, like not worse or better than ever cheap foam tips. But the small ones actually do fit my ear pretty nice. And on some IEMs, I do really prefer the smaller sized foam tips here. And also their overall durability is pretty well. I've been using the smaller one, or 1 pair, on different in-ears over like more than a year, and they still look pretty fine. So yeah, the silicone tips unfortunately are just bog standard, like there's nothing special, they're not terrible, they're just silicone foam tips. Okay, so after we covered the accessories, let's get the packaging and unbox the casing. As many other TWS, this thing comes with Bluetooth 5, and I can already tell you, before we go to the box, let me just tell you, the overall build quality of this thing is pretty well, and the Bluetooth connection is also pretty strong. It's, I think, among the better ones I have had. And if I were to tell you, if I think about it, it might even be the best TWS I have had just connection-wise. So usually when I do have a Bluetooth product, it is like you go to the neighbor room. In my office, it would be directly in the opposite side of the hall, the toilet. It's totally fine. But if I go one room away, it would be the kitchen, then I would get cutouts. And with this thing, I didn't get cutouts in the next room to that. Only if I would go one room far away, then I would be getting the first cutouts. And this is pretty nice. And I think also the overall like connection strength, because it just has AAC and SBC, right? They originally promised aptX, but that got dropped out. And the aptX the SBC implementation here is well enough. Like obviously sometimes you do notice the quality not being that great, but it's fine, you know, like the connection itself is pretty strong, and I didn't have any problems with it. So yeah, then let's go over the thing here. As I said, USB-C. The part itself is not recessed. You can plug any cables in. The back hinge is made out of metal, seems to be pretty sturdy. And at the bottom, you do get 2 rubber feet. And I think like rubber feet beneath them, there should be screws. I haven't had the need to unscrew them. And the overall packaging, like this is metal, and the bottom thing is plastic. And if you open it, which is I'm going to do now, wrong direction. You get greeted by matte plastic here, shiny plastic here, and their logo. Yeah, it's a bit weird with the color scheme, I want to say. And as you can already see, you do have ear hooks, and the ear hook implementation here I do like. This is not super sturdy, but it keeps its shape well enough so it does not like pressurize your ear too much. And when we still talk about the box is relatively big. If I would have to measure it, let me just grab a ruler. The box is 8 centimeters wide and 6 centimeters long and about 3 centimeters high. So you do have a relatively big box here, and I think it will fit in most pockets, but if you have smaller pockets, yeah, well, you will probably need to have a bag or something. And yes, as I said, the overall implementation of the case is pretty well. The magnets here could be a tad stronger, so sometimes you can already see it now it wants to connect. That should not be the case, so that's one of the problems. The magnets could be stronger, so it just stays a bit more secure. When you shake it a bit, one of them tends to shake loose, and then it wants to connect, and that obviously is going to kill the battery in the long term. So now let's come to the TWS itself. And yeah, as I said, the ear hook I do like. As you can see, it's a bit springy, but not too bad. And if you would put it over your ear, it did not pressure my ear in any uncomfortable way. A bit weird is the metal hook thing here. I'm not entirely sure why they choose metal, but I think the main reason here is the weight. So the weight distribution here is like 50% here and 50% here. And overall, yeah, I think it does work pretty well. I can see people using this thing for sport because it does sit really secure in and over your ear if you manage to get and fit. And when we come from the hooks to the casing itself, the overall gap, you can definitely feel it with your finger, but it's relatively small, and I also think it has like IPX4 rating or something like that, so you can even use it for sport activities like jogging, or if you want to do anything else. I think it will totally be fine. On a side note, this is a touch surface, and I think pressing it once will pause and play. Double press I think is next track, and I don't know what actually triple press is. But the touch surface itself, it does work, but is not the most precise touch thing I've had. And also the delay is pretty high, even compared to other audio products, Bluetooth audio products. I mean, if you press it, it will take at least like half a second, more like 3/4 of a second until it decides, oh yeah, you pressed Bluetooth, you pressed pause or play. Let me pause your music. And unfortunately also, to already spoil you for later on, there's no app. You can't rebind the controls in any way. And you also will not be getting any updates, but more on that later on. So yeah, I'm currently having the tin T4 tips, but this is like totally like matter of taste. The included foam tips are totally fine, and the isolation is pretty well. And yeah, the metal grill here is just standard metal grill. Like what they could maybe a bit improve is putting a plastic lip here, so you can use other more loose rubber or silicone tips, because now if you do have a pair which is a bit wider, which is most of my like white board tips, they are generally a bit wider, I can't use them here because they tend to stick in my ear. That's a bit in chain. And yeah, here the loading contacts, and as I said, the magnet itself could be stronger. Yeah, but besides that, I do not have any problem with this build quality. For I think it was like 100 euro-ish or so when it was in crowdfunding. It's totally fine. No complaints build quality wise. Okay, so then we already covered build quality. Let's talk about sound. And as a short summary here, I think they sound pretty poor. They don't sound terrible again, but judging from the price, like 100 euro, and from the marketing materials, I did expect quite a bit more than they actually do deliver here. And I think this is mostly a problem of their advertising, because they do advertise it as like in more, I don't know, say audiophile experience, but a more sound quality focused experience. And this unfortunately just isn't it. The tuning is really mainstream, and I just don't like the way they sound. But even if you just remove my personal experience, their technicalities are not that good. So yeah, let's start with the detailed review of audio. And we obviously start with treble again. And first thing, treble extension is not that great. I would probably compare it most likely, also overall tuning wise, with the SE215. So you do have a treble roll-off which happens a bit too early or too abrupt. And the frequency graph they show on their Kickstarter page, unfortunately, does show a peak, I think at like 17 kilohertz or so, and that is just not audible. I think the main problem with this is they're using weird compensation, and they obviously don't specify what they compensate for. So the peak is, it looks much higher on the graph than it actually is audible. Like overall, I don't think the 17K or the 16K peak, it's just inaudible. You just don't notice the additional air it should give. And this is a bit of a shame, because I also found the general treble representation to be a bit lacking, and a bit air above it would have made it just better. And yeah, unfortunately just this SE215 levels of treble extension and upper treble quality. And it does not get really better when we come from upper treble to mid treble, because this thing also is not the best mid treble sounding thing. Yeah, I think it does lag a bit of like treble presence and also treble tonality and treble balance. I mean treble balance overall. Sometimes it does tend to be a bit spiky in some songs, which makes the overall treble representation feel a bit hollow, a bit like not even incomplete, but really I would say hollow in this case. And yeah, originally I did plan to give a few examples where treble at least worked decently enough, but seriously, I was not able to find any song where I said, oh yeah, treble is still well enough. Because in most songs, treble is not like insultingly bad. It's just like SE215, it's okay, but you will always be like, yeah, there's something missing, I want more. And then sometimes you do get the spikes, and you're like, ah, this is a bit shrill, like a bit, not piercing, but a bit shrill. And this overall just was not good enough to my ears. Next thing, upper mids. And unfortunately, upper mids are not much better than treble. I would even go as far as to say the upper mids are probably even more spiky than the treble. And this especially is true for electric guitars. Seriously, this is one of the IEMs or one of the audio products I've ever heard which is so terrible with electric guitars. And with that I mean, the upper part of electric guitars is really shrill, like spiky shrill, which makes the overall balance of electric guitars totally off. I can, like, here I did even note some examples. I do really like Linkin Park, and what I've done is really good track. And even though I love the song, and I even do listen to it with the SE215s without any problems, with the EOZ Air, the overall balance is so bad with anything with electric guitars. In this song, I could not focus on vocals because the guitars are like not overall balanced, and then they have this shrill, piercing sound to them. And it just does not work out for everything I threw at them with electric guitars. Another good example, Stormbringers from Warrior Path. Also really like the overall melodics of the song. And again, because the way electric guitars are represented with their incompleteness, it just feels, it just does not, it shifts the overall attention from the vocals and the melodics to the shrill guitar sounds, and it just does not work. God, it's really, it's the worst thing for electric guitars I've ever heard. Yeah, period. And the last example I want to give would be Memento Mori from Venator. And here I will probably need to give you a timestamp because that song is like 15 minutes long. And at 2 minutes 32 to 2 minutes 35, there also is an electric guitar there, and that is also much too spiky, and it shifts the overall tonality from a rather balanced song to a really spiky overall presentation. It just doesn't sound well. Yeah, also the spikiness of electric guitars, it does translate a bit to female vocals. The female vocals, it's not that bad as it is for electric guitars, but it still is not good. I would overall compare the sound of upper mids most likely to something like the Denon GC30, which also it sounded a bit nasal, a bit incomplete, but not overall bad. This is also what I would say for the EOZ Air too, but this still adds a tiny bit of sometimes shout to it, which makes it a bit worse. Fortunately, not everything is bad in EOZ land, and what is not terrible here is the mids. And to be clear, I don't say the mids are good, I'm just saying the mids are not as bad as treble, upper treble, and upper mids. And this is probably most true because in this regards, I think the graph does hold true, like the graph they show on their Kickstarter campaign, that the mids are relatively flat. And yes, because overall it does have a tiny bit of a V-shape, they are a bit recessed, but it's by far not as bad as, for example, the Tin T4, which did push out male vocals so far out of the mix, but I was like, I can't listen to it. I just can't. It just didn't work for the majority of metal I listened to. It just didn't work for me. But this is totally fine for mids. And I would also say, if you tend to listen to a podcast regularly, this will also be totally fine for you. It is not super present, like the mids are definitely not, I wouldn't describe them as super clean, but they are clean enough that you won't have any problems with them. Most of the time. Unfortunately, center image is not really present for upper mids and mids, and this makes the vocals at rather poorly mixed songs, for example, some Iron Maiden stuff, they're not as good as they can be even with other IEMs at an like affordable price point, let's say 50 or 30 euros. I think we can shortly skip over lower mids. They are totally fine. They are not overly pronounced. They are not too detailed. They are not terrible. They are just, they're fine. Like, can't tell you more about them. They didn't stand out to me in any positive or negative way. Now we come to, I think, the most controversial topic of the EOZ Air, and this is probably mid-bass. Because the thing that the EOZ Air do, and which is probably also the point where their graph shows what it is compensated for something weird, or some random audio target, is they do have a pretty bad, or like pretty solid, not pretty solid, a pretty high mid-bass boost. And this just leads to a pretty, like I said, I wrote down thumpy and light feeling bass. And I think many people will probably enjoy the way the bass is represented here, just because it is such a mid-bass boost and it does not bleed too much into the lower mids, which also is not, like, this is probably well enough tuned, but it just doesn't fit my personal preference of like in-ear sound or general sound. I do like it. Then there's a bit of a tiny bit of mid bass, but like a bit of mid bass. Then the mid bass is a bit elevated, but not overall like thumpy or like I would even say bloated for this kind of representation here. I do like a bit less, but then I do like a good extension in the sub bass. And when we when we come from here mid bass to sub bass, I think also the graph is not true because the sub bass extension here and overall sub bass balance is a bit off. It's definitely shifted towards the mid bass, and this in turn is just doesn't fit my personal preference. Like the extension goes in interstellar mountains, the example I'm most of the time using when I talk about sub bass extension. The bass note, which starts at I think 2 minutes 10 or so, it is held until 2 minutes 14.5. And yes, important, the 0.5 here, I really mean it. Sometimes it's just until almost 214, and it's sometimes until 215, but this is like until 214.5. And then you do lose everything of the sub bass note. And this overall I would describe as a rather like mediocre bass extension. It's not terrible, it's not super well, but you can definitely live with it, and yeah, it's totally fine. Soundstage imaging and layering I'm going to put in one chapter here because this thing does neither pack in good Soundstage, nor does it image well, or nor does it layer well. And this is not such a super huge problem because we are talking about an TWS here, and most of the TWS don't pack either Soundstage imaging or layering. So I can tell you it is as bad as you probably expect, but it is not as terrible as, for example, the SE215, where you do have just a tiny bit of layering, you have no soundstage whatsoever, and you have also almost no like really center image. This one is not really good at center imaging, but it does a bit, and overall it's as bad or good as you expect when you talk about a no-name crowdfunding company which produce an in-ear on the TWS. So yeah, what I did skip a bit in the review so far is the overall detail retrieval, because this is a thing where the EOZ Air really struggles. I would even go as far as to say what you do get performance-wise is maybe on the level of €30/$ in ear. And even when I grab something like the, I have them for example, the EA3s here, they do outperform the EOZ Air by a whole lot of margin. Like it is not even close. Those are also, they have a really good mid-bass punch and also not super well sub-bass extension, but the overall balancing is much better done. And this combined with the much better detail retrieval, it is not close to being in competition here. This outplays the EOZ Air by, like seriously, it's not even fair in comparison to make here. And this is also a problem because there is something like the Blondes BL03, which cost I think €30 or so, and then they're on sale even a bit less. And even those will outperform the EOZ Air by quite a margin. And when you write something, okay, I'll come back to that later on, in your crowdfunding campaign like they do, this is straight up, it's a lie. You can't advertise your product as something totally well sounding, and then or like more like audio fee sounding, and then you just don't deliver it. Why would you do that? This is going to hurt the overall reputation, and for me personally, it does work for just sometimes listening to podcasts or so, but as soon as I start listening to music, I just don't want to listen to music to them. It is lacking the detail retrieval so bad. Every busy track, and I mean every busy track, does lose detail. As soon as you do have multiple guitars, maybe vocals and something else, it is smearing things together. It is not fun to listen to this thing. It's because the detail retrieval is so bad. And I give you a few examples for that. This is the time Ballast from Nothing More. The track isn't really complicated. It's just a it's like in the new metal region. But as soon as we do come to faster passages where we have more than just one guitar, maybe a bass guitar and drums, it just smears things together. You can still distinguish there is an electric guitar in here, but what notes are they playing or how fast they are doing? I just can't tell you. This is just poorly performing with anything guitar related, and then it gets too busy, you lose almost every detail there are. Yeah, but there's a but. The overall detail performance is not that bad that it won't work for slower tracks. And I did make a few notes here for an example where it did work reasonably well. And this is when the track gets slower. And this, for example, again, this is the time at 2 minutes 15, the mix gets slower, and then it overall works. The overall image distinction gets not better, but it does not matter too much. And the vocals, as I said, are not that pushed back, so it will totally be fine around 2 minutes 15, and this is the time. Also in Hands Held High by Linkin Park, which is also a rather slow, ballad-like track, it also worked totally fine. I did not have any problems with it, besides obviously the overall guitar representation, but that it does tend to smear and lose details is not that important if you have a slower track. And this also translates, I think, best to the genre what the EOZ Air can reproduce well. And I think you will totally be fine if you listen to rather slow synth or synth wave tracks. And especially I'm talking about here more like dark synth. This is working totally fine, especially like Replicant. I did know just one track, Fractured, did work totally fine. Yeah, I didn't have any problems with it, as it is relatively slow. It has a but more mid-based focused bass line, and that just did work totally fine. Also, Voids and Valleys from Caspro, I had no problems with it whatsoever, and even something a bit faster, just Dance with the Dead, I didn't know it near dark. It did work fine. Again, it did have a few problems with detail retrieval, but it overall was by far not as bad as anything with electric guitars. Okay, so this overall covers the sound section of this review, and now I'm still going to talk about, well, like the overall question: should you buy or should you trust a random crowdfunding company like EOZ? And for that, I did note down a few quotes from their crowdfunding campaign. So just give you a good image of how well they perform. First quote: free sizes of memory ear tips SML. Well, I told you there are only 2 pair of ear tips included, memory foam ear tips included, and I also doubt that they're memory foam, they're just foam. They're not like the tin T4 tips, then let me just press them together, that's also why I still have them. You see that? They keep their shape, and if they're in your ear, yeah, they're totally fine. But the included ear tips here, even when I warm them up, they're going to instantly jump back. So I doubt, A, it's memory foam, and then you only get 2 pairs. Second quote: you get an audio experience on par with the best wired headphones on the market. Well, what do you define as best? I already said that something like the SE215 has an overall similar like balance, but the technicalities probably a bit better there. And if you just take a look at the more chi-fi market, for example the TIN T2, it's going to outperform those by a whole lot of margin. And when we still grab something like more V-shaped, like the EA3 here, it's also like a whole lot better. So what do you define as like best wired experience? At this price point are we talking? Do we talk about 30 euros? This is like, I don't want to call it a lie here, but it's just a totally over-exaggeration of what the thing can and what it can't. And I think if I would have just toned down their campaign to say, yeah, we are delivering experience like, I don't know, Beats or something, then somebody like me would have not gotten the product at all, because then I would have known, okay, it's Beats, you know, I don't need a mid-bass boost, I don't need mid-bass bleed, I just don't need it. Okay, yeah, third quote. Fine-tuned high-resolution audio for natural sound signature combined with the latest aptX technology. Okay, so I did say before there is no aptX. It was originally advertised, and then I think like a month before they started shipping, they were like, yeah, you know, we throw aptX out. You can't hear the difference anyway, so we just went with another cheapo Bluetooth chip, so no aptX anymore. And I don't find the lack of aptX to be super disturbing, but this is straight up a lie. They didn't even bother removing it supports aptX on their product page. They didn't even bother in a chapter, in the crowdfunding campaign saying, no, this has no longer aptX. We did get a short comment saying, yeah, you can't hear the difference anyway, deal with it. And this, in combination with their over-exaggeration, like fine-tuned high-resolution audio, this is not fine-tuned. It is not even like Harman close. It's definitely warm, mid-bass focused. And it's again, why do you choose to advertise a product with words which you know are not true? It is baffling to me. Why would you like advertise a product as something which it just isn't? If you would have just again said it is similar to other mainstream audio products like Beats or whatever, then anybody who does like Beats or similar brands would be like, oh yes, I know what this is, I want to buy it. And anyone like me who sees the graph, which I didn't know it was compensated for anything, so I just thought, oh, it's probably raw measurement. It isn't. Just got it because graph did look well enough for me. And it's baffling to me. Seriously, I don't know what to say here. And as last quote, I want to give you powerful bass and super clear, crispy mid-highs. Okay, so yeah, you do have a powerful mid-bass, but bass extension is not nice. Bass texture is not well. And crispy mid-highs, no, they are spiky mid-highs. The difference between crispy mid-highs would be you have a relatively smooth lower treble and upper mid representation, where this here is spiky. So it is just, I don't know, it's not true. Why would you write something like that? Just say powerful bass. This is everything you would need to wear, or powerful mid bass. Then I would have never gotten this pair. Again, I don't understand why you would just write things which are not true or so exaggerated in your crowdfunding campaign. And yeah, as last point, before I really tell you if you should trust or buy it, what my personal opinion is, right? If you do look at the comments of their Kickstarter campaign, which I really suggest you whenever you want to buy a product which was crowdfunded originally, look at the campaign, look at the comments, look how the response by the campaign producers are, because responses here is poor. And I mean really poor. Sometimes they do respond, most of the times they just ignore people. And if you do look what problems they are, this product is like 1.5 years or so old, and there are quite a few people complaining about battery issues. They're complaining about connection issues. They're complaining about having difficulties getting their warranty, and so on and so on and so on. There's so many people having problems, and none of that, or like most of them, don't get any replies. And if you write an email, you most of the time get a standardized answer like, yeah, look at our support page. Well, this is just not helpful. Like, you should at least take the time to work with your customers. It's just not in good image, and also not good for anyone who has problems, that you just send automatic replies and not ignore everyone in the crowdfunding campaign. As a good example how crowdfunding should be, I did crowdfund the Keychron Key K3 I think, and on that crowdfunding page you see replies to almost every comment. If somebody has support problems, then you get like, oh yeah, please email them again. You always have the feeling the producers of this keyboard actually care about the customers. And with EOZ, they didn't bother even telling the people there's no longer an app in the making, because, yeah, maybe I forgot it before, originally there was an app planned. And this app should have supported software updates. It should have supported custom EQ profiles. It should have supported profile saving on your phone. It should have supported changing the remote, the controls on your TWS. But that just got cancelled midway. And for this, they didn't even bother telling the people that it was cancelled. It just was cancelled and then never talked about it again. This is seriously a behavior which is not fraud, right? But it is so close to being fraud. I'm like, why are you not explaining people why you're not doing it? And I give you one last story about support. At one point, one of my friends, because I did buy, I think, like 4 pairs at once with some friends, his EOZ it just died. It didn't want to connect anything, didn't want to do anything, and he did write an email to the support, I think 2 times, and 2 times he got standard automated email back which tell them look at the support section. That obviously did not help. So only after I wrote a 3rd email strongly saying I want a replacement, it just doesn't work, then they bothered reading my email and what the actual problem was, and then referring to the relatively complicated reset procedure. And then my friend had to reset his EOZ Air, I think 2 times, and then it did work again. But you do get like automated replies without any real information. And only after you like almost threaten them to just, you want a replacement, then you are only getting a useful reply. Well, that's just, it just isn't good, you know. This is also, when we now finish with the question, should you buy or trust random crowdfunding companies like EOZ Air? I would say no, you shouldn't. Their customer support most of the time is not even good, it's poor. And obviously you can be lucky, something like the Keychron K3, where you do have a pretty good support, but please inform yourself. Go to the crowdfunding campaigns, go to older campaigns, look what the comments say. If they are mostly answers to their comments, that's a pretty good sign. Are there negative user comments with replies? That's a good sign. Are there just negative user comments without any reply by the campaign producer or any statements whatsoever? Really, really bad sign. Don't just buy something like the EOZ Arc because Zeos said, oh yeah, it sounds good with ANC. Well, it may be decently tuned. I don't plan even to get them because they're currently customer support and how they just give a fuck about everything. I'm not buying a $140 or what's it, $140 EOZ Arc because Zeos told me when you can see the support or the overall customer experience of people was so bad with the EOZ Air. And then we can still add things like, again, I said, the problems with their marketing campaign and the problems with people having, like, it's just, I would not recommend getting the EOZ Air. And I would not recommend buying the EOZ Arc or even thinking about buying the EOZ Arc. Inform yourself before you even think about buying it. It is just a campaign producer like EOZ here, they would have the chance to be so much better than a marketing competition, but they just choose not to be. So why should we choose a no-name company with an, I don't want to say bad warranty at the moment because it's only their third product, I think, but why should you choose EOZ instead of anyone else? I can't think of any reason because also the way they did produce their products at the moment is just not what they did promise. And with this, I want to almost conclude. The last thing I'm going to do is battery life, because one strong point is battery life here. Originally, it was advertised as 90 hours, 5.5 hours in these two, and 80 hours in this thing. And originally, I can tell you, yeah, that was pretty much true. I could get 5.5 hours out of this thing, and then charging this for, I think, like the 85 hours, I did get like 83 or so. But again, this is this is really good battery life. And here again, I have to tell you a small point of critique. The battery does definitively deteriorate over time, and at the moment I'm not getting the 5.5 hours. I'm more, I want to say, on the 4.5 or 4 hour-ish mark, and if you combine that with my habit of listening to music relatively quiet, well, yeah, I think most people will probably be at around like 3.5-ish hour mark, and the case itself, I can't tell you how much battery life it has at the moment. I think you will probably be also more at this, like, I say 70 hour-ish mark, maybe 75 hour, but overall you still get really good battery life out of it, and you just can throw it in here every day in like your work week, and even in second week if you don't listen to it too often, and you will be totally fine. So that is a point which is really, like, well, not really, it is pretty good about this thing. And I think if I would have went in the direction this is a long-lasting, like base-focused IEM, many people would not have gotten it, and many other people who were like, oh yeah, it's long-lasting and it has mid-bass, they would have gotten it. And I would have not made this video because the advertisement was just so exaggerated. And yeah, this covers it for the EOZ Air. And I hope you do inform yourself about the crowdfunding campaigns you are supporting. And with this, Donspektor out.